So the first reading is Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. The second reading is from Matthew, chapter 6, verses 24 to 34. Do not worry. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the lilies of the field grow. They do not labour or spin, yet I tell you that not even Solomon, in all his splendour, was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you? O you of little faith, so do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all of these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own.
Thank you very much indeed for those readings. So, Psalm 121, if you have that in front of you on a piece of paper. If not, wave your hand in the air, and I'm sure an excellent steward will come rushing round with some more bits of paper, assuming you can all see one. So, Psalm 121, one of those psalms, sorry, I will just put other people who haven't got a piece of paper with this on. Look at that, senior steward, no less. Absolutely. I'll treat you with more respect in future. So, Psalm 121, I wonder when you hear those words, are you taken back to Christmas, and are you thinking of the sound of music and, you know, the great songs that come from the hills there? It's a psalm that really has sort of come into our culture. I was talking after the 9 o'clock service, and somebody there who comes from Scotland was saying how intrinsic it is to the Scottish way of life, and that it's used in all sorts of different ways. In my own immediate family, in the course of the last 2 years, we've used this psalm at a wedding, and we've also used it at a funeral. So it's a psalm that can speak to us in lots of different ways. It's a beautiful psalm. It's a psalm that has amazing ideas. But as so often, if we know the context of it, then it will tell us even more. The problem is that this is a poem, and it's very difficult to get any context from poetry. It's very hard to work out exactly when it was written, whether it was talking about a particular event or a particular time. It's not like it's a newspaper, it's not like it's a piece of news, it's not like it's a report, it's not talking about a particular person. So what is the context what clues can we get from it to tell us something about who wrote it and when they wrote it and what they were particularly thinking of. There is nothing in the psalm at all. It's simply ideas about God. But there is just one clue, and that is in the second line. So your piece of paper will say Psalm 121, a song of ascents. A song of ascents. That's the only clue that we have as to the context of this psalm. There are 150 psalms in our Old Testament. 15 of them have this title, A Song of Ascents, and the person who put them together put all of those together. So it's sort of quite convenient. But what is it? What we're talking about? What is this ascent that this psalm and the other 14 have been written for? It's thought that probably these are psalms that are written for people who are going on a pilgrimage. So these are people who are leaving their village or their town, their home, and going on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and going there to the temple, the place where it was believed that there was a particular presence of God. And this word ascent can simply mean the physical walking up. To actually go to the temple, you had to walk up a very large number of steps, so quite possibly it simply means that. Or it could mean, much as we often talk about going up to London, because you go up to a capital, it might be that these are pilgrims going from their home up to Jerusalem. Either way, that's what it's thought that these 15 psalms are all about. They're all to do with people on a pilgrimage. Incidentally, for those of you who are interested in such things, many of the psalms were probably written by David. If these psalms are written for pilgrims going to the temple, these ones could not have been written by David, in that the temple had not been built at that time. So these are probably psalms added into the complete psalter, many of whom have psalms we can trace back to David, but perhaps not these particular ones. That's not to say he wouldn't have signed up to these particular sentiments, but perhaps the words themselves don't actually come from him. So then, if we can have in our mind's eye that these are words and ideas that are filling the heads of pilgrims as they leave their home and they journey towards Jerusalem. So what are some of the key ideas that we see here that we might take away with us? First of all, we see in verse 2 that there is a very clear understanding that God is creator. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. In Jewish poetry, if they take two extremes, heaven and earth, they don't just mean heaven and earth, they mean everything, sort of everything in between. So this is a clear statement that help is coming from God, and that God is the creator of everything that we can see and the things that we can't see as well. In addition to that, it is a statement about God's protection, perhaps particularly for those people as they go off on their pilgrimage. Virtually the whole of the rest of the psalm is talking about God's protection in these beautiful pictures that we have here. So, for example, picking out things to do with the natural world. Verse 6, the sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. Again, the sort of extremes. Everything in the day that's natural that could harm you, you will be protected from. Everything at night, you will be protected from. But throughout here, everything to do with protection. So verse 3, he won't let your foot slip. He will watch over you all the time. Verse 5, the Lord watches over you as your shade at your right hand. Remember the sort of context of the sort of country and the climate. So shade was particularly important. And then verse 7, the Lord will keep you from all harm, watch over your life, watch your coming and your going forevermore. So God is creator of everything, and God is protector. God is somebody who, a being who is there to keep hold of those pilgrims, hold them tight, and keep them safe. So these pilgrims then, they set off. And they've got these words ringing in their ears. Possibly they sang them or said them as they went, perhaps on their long journey, perhaps particularly as they went up the steps into the temple. Full of confidence, full of understanding that God has created them and the world around them, and God is there to protect them as well. And I wonder whether when we came into church today, that was our feeling. Did we walk in full of confidence? We know who God is. God has created us and our world. God has protected us. As we look back over the last week, we know that God has been with us, God has spoken with us, God has directed us, God has protected us from people, protected us from harm, protected us from natural things. Are we like those pilgrims setting off? Or have we walked into church today with a different feeling? Have we known that confidence, but it's not where we are today? Or is it something that we're feeling for a while? You know, God, where is God? God seems to be silent. God seems to be speaking to other people, but I can't hear God's voice. God as creator. God as I will give you all you need, like we heard in our second passage, and yet we look at Afghanistan, we look at Yemen, we look at similar places and think, where is that provision for those people? Is our confidence strong, or is it being knocked? So if this psalm is one of confidence, what can it say to us if we're one of those people who have questions at the moment and we're not sure and we are not certain? Now, I think that it can have an enormous amount to say to us, and it all hinges on a full stop or a question mark. So, if you look with me at verse 1, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? In our older versions of the translations in our Bibles, that ended with a full stop. This was a statement of confidence. I'm going to the mountains, and that is where my help comes from. And so that speaks to the people amongst us who are confident in God, confident in his protection and in his creation. But later translations have looked at it more closely, and they all now don't put a full stop, they put the question mark that we have now, and indeed was in the song that we sang. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? This is a question. This isn't a statement of confidence. This is a question. So I wonder why, when those pilgrims were setting out, why did they have a question? I mean, they were heading to Jerusalem. Why were they questioning it? They were questioning this because of the mountains and what the mountains held for them. And mountains are dangerous. I mean, they're hard to climb. The mountains that they were talking about here, they were often wild and dangerous animals, so that was difficult for them. There were often dangerous people there, people who had been excluded from their villages and their towns, and they sort of roamed these mountains, and that made it dangerous for them. There's also physical things like food and drink and so forth. So they look to their mountains. I'm worried, I'm scared. How am I going to eat and drink as I go through the mountains? And finally, I think they might have been worried because whilst the mountains are used by God as evidence and examples of his presence, if you sort of think back maybe to Moses, God is found on a mountain, evidence of his mightiness and his power. The times that these are written, the mountains were used by people who were not following God, and they were following other gods. So as they walked through the mountains, they would have met with idols, they would have met with little altars, maybe little temples and so forth, put there by people who were following different gods. So, as they walked through the mountains, they were faced with physical things to do with the actual climb and the walk. They were faced with things to do with food and drink. They were faced perhaps by dangerous animals. They were faced by dangerous people. And they were faced by temptation. Here we see an altar to a different god. Should I stop and worship, or should I carry on to Jerusalem? So these words, I lift my eyes to the mountains, and then this worry, I'm worried about the mountains, so where is my help going to come from? So if we are either now or sometime in the future or look back on, going through times when actually we're looking ahead and we are worried, we are concerned, we are anxious, despite Jesus' words in Matthew, because we are tempted to follow different routes. We are tempted to go different ways. We have physical things that are a real problem, financial issues that are really causing difficult discussions and heartache and real problems. Or we might perhaps be with people who are doing us harm, relationships that are causing problems for us. They are our mountains today. And so with these pilgrims, we could say, I look to the mountains, or I look to my week at work, or I look to this relationship that is falling apart, or I look to the fact that I know that I'm spending too much time on my fantasy football league that I really, really want to win today, and not doing something else. They are where I need help. So this is a psalm, not of just out and out confidence. It's a psalm of people with questions, a psalm of people who have followed God but are now saying, where is my help? The rest of the psalm is the answer. There's a key thing though, and I think this is so lovely. Verse 1 is all about the first person. I lift my eyes to the mountains, or my work, or my home, or whatever it might be. Where does my help come from? And the answer is given in the third person. He, verse 3, will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Verse 5, the Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. Verse 7, the Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life, over your coming and going, both now and evermore. In other words, let's just have a physical picture in our mind. These pilgrims, they've planned, they've got their rucksack or whatever they had on their back, and they're about to step out. They've stepped out of their homes, they're in their village square. They're looking to the mountains and they say, I look to the mountains, where will my help come from? And around them, their friends, their families, the people that they've known all their life, come back with this answer. This is what their friends and family are saying to them. Your help will come from God. God will look after you. God will protect you. God will stop the sun from burning you and the moon collapsing, or whatever it might be. The Lord will be there. The answer comes from the people around them. And that's maybe what I would like us to take away from today. That whether we are one of those people at the moment saying, I'm looking at my work life, where is my help coming from? I'm looking at my family, God seems to be silent. I'm looking at my relationships. What does God want me to do? Where is God in all of this? I'm looking at the world around me. Where is that creator and protector God? That we need to have the honesty and the trust in others to be able to say, that's where I am now. I believe in God, but. And the rest of us, whether we're that person now or will be that person, we need to be the community around those pilgrims saying, you can't see it, but God is creator, God is protector, God will be with you. Even if you can't see it now, I am with you and holding your hand, and God is with us as well. And we need to do that with graciousness and with no judgment, because even if today we are full of confidence and we know that God is alongside us, he was with us yesterday, this happened, God is speaking to us, I'm absolutely fantastic. that tomorrow it can all change. And suddenly we can be left with questions. So within a church community, one day we will be with the person with questions, and one day we will be the person alongside the other and leading them into paths of righteousness and still waters. I look to the mountains. Where will my help come from? And the chorus comes back from our fellow believers. Our help comes from our Creator and our Protector God. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Amen.